Hello, good afternoon. I'm Simon. I'm here to do some single-handed casting and run through some basic casting mistakes that people make that I've seen in my years of teaching fly fishing, how to recognize them, how to get out of them, maybe how to make you a better caster. First of all though, how many people here actually fish a single-handed rod? Just to get a rough idea. Okay, a few, and mostly two-handed salmons. Bit of everything. Any three-handed? Joking. Well, we're only going to talk about this one-handed rod, the single-handed rod. And I think, so how these demos seem to go down well is to start off with some very simple basics of fly casting, because not everybody understands the basics. And then if you can understand the basics, it's easier to understand what is going wrong. And there's two or three things in fly casting that are so important. One of them, and this isn't my notes, one of them is about the piece of paper. And the reason I got this tatty piece of paper is because when you cast a fly line, you need to consider how would you throw a piece of paper. And you could give this to a 6-year-old kid and tell him to stand at this little buttercup and say, all right, Billy, I want you to throw it to those dock leaves. Billy, if he's 4, might, he might throw it 10 times with more aggression or force, and he's never going to get to the dock leaves. If he's 6, Billy's probably going to go turn it a ball, mission accomplished. And then he say, all right, how do you get it to this clover up here? And Billy's a smart kid. He thinks about it. He turns it into a paper dart. Pew! So the point is, this piece of paper travels a lot better when it's more small, when there's less air resistance. Fly casting has exactly the same concept. You probably all know where I'm going with this, but where I'm going with this is when you cast, you form this shape in the air, and this shape is a loop, and that is your piece of paper. This is a ball of paper. That loop would be an aeroplane, and this loop would be 4-year-old Billy trying to throw his piece of paper. It's so big. Can you see the bigness? What I'm talking about, it's like the width. This is so big, there's so much air resistance on the nose, the cast will fail. So in fly casting, one of the golden objectives is not to throw big wide loops like this, because you can see what happens if you put a lot of effort into them. They fall like the bit of paper, right? The goal is not to cast big loops, but is to control and cast narrow loops. And the narrower your loop is, the tighter the loop is, the better air resistance it has, and the easier it travels and gets more distance. So that is the significance of a loop. As I said, I'm sure you're all aware of that, but if you weren't, you should be now. So the question here is, how do you form those loops, and what mistakes can you identify by watching your loops? And that's what I'm going to tell you about now. So when you make a casting stroke, there is, I'm going to use American terms as approved by the FFI, Federation Fly Fishers something or other, internationals. And that is, when you make a cast, your rod has 2 components on every casting stroke. The first component bends the rod, loads. Like taking a catapult and pulling the elastic back, and the further you pull the elastic back, the further your stone will go. So the more bend the rod has, the more load the rod has, the further your cast will go. That's one. The loading move, watch this rod. The loading move is this kind of stroke. I pull my arm back, and you can see the rod is not lifting. So a lot of people, when they start to fly cast, their first move back is to start lifting the rod up. This is a bad casting stroke. Terminology, go to the American thing, translation it's called. And actually I asked it last week, 2 weeks ago, I was doing a school in Quebec, and there was an engineer there. I said, I don't know why it's called translation, and he explained it. Took an hour. Side story. Don't know why I went down that path. Anyway, translation is where the rod path, you can move. You know what? Do you know what translation? Because you're an engineer, you told me. So he understands it. So anyway, more digression. If your rod starts to arc and rotate from the very first move, you will never ever get good load or tight loops. A good casting stroke is more of a translation, rotation, translation, rotation. Can you see the difference from where you are? Okay, so a good stroke, let's not worry about the length of translation or anything like at the moment, but a good stroke, you load the rod with this move and then you kick the energy out of the rod with that move. And this move is the use of the wrist. And I tell you what, one of my pet peeves are these casting instructors that tell you, oh, you know what, you need to stick your rod in your sleeve here, up your, oh, here's a perfect thing, up your bloody thing, and cast with no wrist. That is terrible advice. Unbelievable advice. I understand why, because using too much wrist is a sin, but using no wrist is a sin too. It's a sin against your day of fun, right? Every cast should consist of a load and a pop of the wrist, and on the forward stroke, see this little wedge shape, this V shape? Pop, 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 pop. See how the rod stays parallel through this part of the stroke and stays parallel through this part of the stroke. So that's the hard part. If you've practiced fly casting for a long time, or you're learning the wrong technique and you start having arcs, no translation, as opposed to this, 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 this. Can you see the difference? Can you guys see the difference from that angle? You'll see it better from this angle. So well, that's one of the hard things, right? The hard thing is to understand that you need a little translation. And at the end, there's 4 letters that make a amazing cast. SSFF. Start slower, finish faster. That big burly men don't like learning fly casting that way. They don't start slow at all. A casting stroke should start slow, and there's the speed, and there's the speed. You can see I can move a fair length of line with very little effort if I maintain translation and I have slow to fast. Every casting stroke. And spade casting, I know this isn't a spade demo, but a lot of people when they're making a spade cast, they're so worried about the sink tip sinking or the line anchoring too much in the water, they come round and go forward, they jump into the stroke because there's a timing per side and you have to go forward when the line lands. But even a good spade cast would start slow and finish with a little bit of speed at the end. So it's irrelevant of what style of cast, a slow start to a quick finish is called an acceleration. And that's all we need in a casting stroke, is just an acceleration. And the slower you start, the easier it is to have an acceleration. The faster you start, well, you start at 60 miles an hour, you're going to have to go really fast to actually have acceleration. You're going to have to finish at 100. And how exhausting is that for a day of fishing using all that energy? So a couple of little reminders, and I'll keep reminding these because these are the nuggets, these are the essential parts. Translation to rotation. And you can practice with the butt end of a rod. One thing you'll notice here, if I turn the reel around this way, is that if you do it correctly, you'll see this reel handle will turn. If I give a nice little snap, see that turn? Turn. That's a good way of knowing that you've got an acceleration at the end. If you start fast and just do it, you hardly get any turn at all. You don't get that zip of energy. So it's a good little practice tool, butt section of a rod. And kind of like I said inside, if there's any questions, please ask away at any single point. If they come to you, don't save them for later because you might forget. Thank you. So that's a good little thing. Translation to rotation, one of the most important things. And then the loop size we were talking about. The loop size, well, how a loop is made. If you understand how a loop is made, what forms the loop, it's actually easy to understand how to control it. And the loop is made I'll try and demonstrate it here. I've never done it in real life, so this could be wrong. Could go utterly pear-shaped. Thankfully, nobody's watching. When you make a forward stroke, your line's behind you, the rod's in the casting position, all the lines straightened out. As you go forward with this translation, you are towing the line. Right? So far, so good. You're towing the line with a rod, and then as the rod accelerates and pivots over, the rod tip, this is what we're going to call the tow path. Right? The tow path forms the top of the loop every single time. Right? You're towing the line, and then when your rod kicks over and deflects, the bottom deflection forms the bottom of the loop. Does that make sense? So in other words, obviously the difference in height between the tow path and the stopping path is what creates the loop size. That's the nuts of this demonstration. So when you have when you want to tighten your loops up, people call it keep the rod traveling in a straight line rod path, paint the ceiling as another analogy. My dad would, when he was teaching people to fly fish, he would say, dip your rod in some water and just paint a line along the ceiling. Right, if you're on the ceiling, you're keeping your rod pretty horizontal. And if you're painting the wall, right, there's the tow path, there's the stop. So if I stop here, the tow path's here, that's a huge loop. If I tow path here and I stop here, it's a smaller loop. So the loop size is completely controlled by the difference in height. So I'm going to show you, here's the tow, there's the kick. Right, here, what's the tow again? Tow, 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 kick over. Nice tight loops, because my rod is kicking and stopping just below the tow path. If my rod comes way below the tow path, look at the loop size, tow, tow, tow. Right, so again, if you want to master tight loops, control and mentally think in your mind, and again, take this thing. This is brilliant. Or go and take your dog for a walk and pick up some stick and go, oh, hang on Fido, I'm not throwing this for you, I'm going to practice my tow path. Tow with translation, tow isn't this, you don't push a line forward. That's a rubbish. Tow, pivot over. And that's a hard thing to do. You know, I teach an awful lot of people fly casting, and yes, Simon, you did like this, right? Is that right or wrong? Does that have translation and rotation? I mean, somebody shake your head or nod if you saw it. Good. These guys watching. This is terrible. Look at it, it's just pivoting. It's like a windscreen wiper cleaning the window. Meep, meep. Terrible. I need that. This move, that move. So much more control and energy in that line when you can translate and rotate a little bit. So that's your first challenge. If you haven't got that in your single-handed casting, you're more than welcome to obviously have a go here with these lines and have a little shot after my talk and see if it works out for you. Now, let's identify a couple of things that commonly go wrong. The big loop is one, wide angle, big difference between tow path and stop path. Another one is a loop that does this, crosses itself. It's called a tailing loop. Some people say wind knot, wind blew, got a wind knot. And what a tailing loop looks like, can you see this orange line, by the way, against the trees? I picked it because I think you might. I'm going to make 3 casts, and if you look at my forward cast on all 3 of them, I'll put a tailing loop in the 3rd, so you can first of all see exactly what I'm talking about. So these are regular loops. 1, 2, they're parallel. Here's a tailing loop. And you can literally see a knot tied into it. That's not good. Nobody wants that. First of all, you get bad presentation, doesn't reach the fish. Secondly, you get a wind knot in your leader and you hook that fish and it breaks you off and you go, bloody wind. Nothing to do with the wind, it's to do with the smoothness of your casting stroke. I'll do that same move again, but this time don't watch the line, watch my hand, and the first 2 you'll see this nice smooth translation, start slow, finish faster, and then in the 3rd one you'll see my hand do a little jag, a snatch, a slight aggressive stroke. And if you watch the hand do it, 1, 2, now watch my hand. So I get that little sharp snap and immediately the loop starts to twist. So if you're getting wind knots or you're tailing loops, you have no smoothness in the acceleration somewhere, and it could be the wind, right? The wind gets up and you just go like this and you go, oh, the wind's up, so I need to hit it a bit harder. Ah, it blew a bloody tangle in it. So you might mentally adjust for the wind, but it's nothing to do with the wind. It's that somehow your acceleration has gone erratic. You've lost that fluidity that's so essential, the smooth acceleration. Okay, what else can we look at? Well, let's take a look at, I'm going to do the same thing, 3 forward casts, and have a look at the difference in the angle of the third cast. Your normal cast, when you're false casting, drying your fly off, changing direction, lengthening a line, your normal cast should have loops that travel parallel. So here's a parallel, you know, these are nice loops that are parallel to the ground. That's what they should look like. Now I'm going to introduce one of the hardest things for you to self-criticize, but very easy to see and criticize your partner or your buddy, if you dare criticize them. And that is a thing called creep. Creep, I'm going to give you the concept of creep first, and then show you how you recognize it in the casting stroke. When you make a back cast and you've got this translation, rotation, when you have finished this rotation, this rod stops, absolutely motionless, until all the orange line unrolls to the perfect straight. And then when it's dead straight, the rod can start to come forward slowly, right? Because we start slow, finish fast. So a good stroke is slow to fast, stop, slow to fast, stop, slow to fast, stop. And what happens, maybe it's the haste, I don't know what it is, but what happens, a lot of people introduce creep. And creep is this: while they're waiting for the line to unroll, their rod is doing this, creeping forward. And now they apply their forward stroke. Well, they've lost half their backstroke because they're creeping, and now I'm going to apply the forward stroke. Well, it's like me trying to throw a cricket ball from here. I can't get any range on that. If I want to throw the cricket ball from the boundary to the stumps, I'm going to wallop it from back here. I want a long throw. So same thing, when you want a good cast, you want a long stroke. So creep truncates the stroke. You could do it this way. And how you recognize that is that the front loop will start to nosedive. It's a very easy visual. You watch somebody's loops, and if their loops are parallel, see how still my rod is? Dead. Now I'm going to show you creep, and see the line just started to angle its way down. That's the telltale sign. That's when you're watching your buddy, watching yourself, watching your partner, and if you see that their line is just nosediving towards the water each time, it's because they're creeping. You can see it's hard to see, or is it easy to see? Can you see my creep? Can you see my creep? Okay. So then it's easy to see. Have a watch at people's hands. Watch your own hand, watch somebody else's hand, and if you see it even fractionally moving forward, that's the creep. And that creep, as I said, you're going to lose distance, and above all, you're going to get that descending forward loop. So just, again, these are little tools to help you help yourself and other people watch what they're doing.
Is that only after before the line straightens out?
Yes.
Because once it straightens out, you'll be doing that.
Yes. Yes, you do. Then you slow to fast, exactly. Yep, once it's straight, exactly. So this would be good timing. See, it was still nice and slow, but here's the bad timing. You know, I kind of, whilst it's going back, I'm creeping forward. And so that gives that low trajectory cast. Now, what else goes wrong? Well, if you recall, one of the earliest things I said was the 4 letters of a good cast: start slow, finish faster. And unfortunately, when there's a timing involved, people get a little hasty. And when they're ready to get into the forward stroke, instead of starting with this graceful, fluid stroke, they start with a bit of a zip. And this is so common that if I ask 10 of you up here, 7 of you possibly, the averages, I'm not picking anyone, averages, at least 70% of people have this problem. This problem, I call it the fluttering leader. Have a look at my leader land on this cast and you'll see what I'm talking about. See how it kind of fluttered down. It didn't turn over and land. You know, a good cast should turn over, land and start fishing. That's a perfect presentation cast. But if a cast does this, A, you're losing distance, B, it looks terrible, and we all want to look nice casters, we want to be pretty casters, and C, it's a waste of effort. And the only time you actually do this, if you have technical dry fly fishing, you actually want this. If you have a lot of micro currents and there's a fast bit of current where my fly is, I don't want a tight cast from me to the fly, because that fast current will immediately drag the fly. So sometimes I want slack at that end. So sometimes you actually do this. But what it is, it's the forward stroke starting with a jump. That's it, just a jump. So again, watch, I'll do 3 casts. First 2 will be nice and smooth. And any one of these I could just lay down and it turns over and fishes. Now this one starts quickly. And then that haste, what happens when you start with a fast forward stroke, the rod immediately deflects backwards. There's the action, what is the saying, for every action there's equal opposite reaction. So if I go quickly forward that way, it quickly descends that way. And then because it's gone down this way, it fires up. That's because you started fast. So if you see, and you're constantly, and it's terrible when there's a wind blowing in your face, right? Because what is the natural thing when you have wind in your face? Well, it'll get a little harder because there's wind. And if the hard part's here, it's the worst thing you can do because the line goes even higher and then the wind just completely crushes it. It's this slow stroke with a bit of speed at the end is what you need. So start slow and finish faster. And then really the last little part of this kind of basic overhead casting tutorial is to introduce something that's a slightly more advanced technical style of casting called drift. Drift is an opposite thing to creep. If I say that, you should be able to calculate what it is. Creep is where the rod moves forward as I'm waiting for the back cast to unroll. Ergo, drift is the rod moves backwards while you're waiting for the rod tip line to unroll. And why you would do that? Well, let's say you want to make the longest possible tournament distance cast. And if you want to throw a javelin, a spear, a ball as far as possible, you're going to throw it from here and you're going to have all the weight off on this back and you're going to transfer all your weight and then follow through and maybe even step through whatever happens, but you're going to start from a very far back position. Well, if you remember how a loop was formed, and now I was talking about a back loop, tow path, kick over to here, there's that shape loop. So if I wanted to start a forward stroke from horizontal, you can't do it in part of the cast, because if you go right back to horizontal, look how big the loop is. So what you do is you introduce drift, and here's a simple drift. See how the rod drifted back. I'm imagining that the line is pulling my rod back. Loop formed, there's the line pulling it back. And now my arm is in this position. I formed the loop ages ago, half a second ago. But after the loop was formed, the inertia of the line going this way drifted my arm back. Now, in fishing, you would never go to a horizontal because you're going to snag all the grass behind you. But tournament casting, in the old tournament days, every casting stroke was like this. It doesn't matter if you go and touch the grass because you have a bit of grass on, you have a bit of wool on. Every single tournament cast, you'll see the big range distances, that drift takes you to the horizontal and all the weights back. And then you have this long stroke forward because acceleration creates speed if combined with distance. What I mean by that is, let's say you get in a Ferrari and the guy says, you get this Ferrari if you can get to 100 miles an hour. You say, what's wrong with it? Nothing, it's a brand new Ferrari. Only 100? Sure. All right, you get in and he says, you've got to get there within 2 feet. No chance. You can't get to 102 feet, even in the fastest car there is. Same with this. If I want to get a lot of speed, I cannot get a lot of speed with a short stroke from here to here. To get maximum acceleration, that's why you would drift back to here and have this very long loading move before your final distance cast. So when you really want to get distance, and probably not all of you want to be tournament casters and stand on the grass and catch nothing and get all the comments, caught any worms, or how's the grass carp, or whatever they say, You may not be in that, but I want to give you the physics of casting. And if you have the physics of casting, you can adapt for your fishing. If you need a bit more distance, just add a little bit of drift. Then you're going to get a longer stroke. So your Ferrari now has 10 feet to accelerate, not 2 feet. And those are your kind of the concepts of your basic casting. Just a little drift back, much more speed forward.